end of the last video, we talked about how it was frustrating to do such a hard exit when there was a word that was entered that we wanted to censor. It's probably, in fact, much better if we continue to prompt the user until we get a proper value. This is a common pattern in programming, and it's usually solved using what is known as a while loop. Now, what happens is you run the same code block until a certain condition is no longer true. In other words, while this condition is true, do these things. Java has a nice feature called a do while loop, which allows us to first run the code once before any loop checking is done. Let's use the do while loop to make sure that the user enters a valid word.
Okay, so the first thing we'll want to do is locate the block that we want to repeat. So like we said, we want to continuously prompt the user until we get a valid noun. So it looks like here's a good place to start. So in order to repeat the code, what we'll do is we'll use the keyword do, and then we'll do an open bracket there, which that signifies that there's a new code block coming. I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to press the tab key. Great. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to change the exiting text because we're no longer going to exit. So let's come over in here and we'll change this to say try again. And then we will get rid of this system exit because we're no longer going to exit. Okay, so next, what we're going to say now is we're going to end the do loop, that code block, and then we're going to put in while. All right, and so now we were going to loop while these things are invalid. So we already have a statement for this, which is that, and then we'll do or, and then we'll do this, and then we'll end the semicolon. All right, now I hope that is starting to feel wrong to you, and that you just had a thought that said, wait a second, you said don't repeat yourself. Well, don't worry, we'll fix that in a minute. Now, in addition to repeating ourselves, I just introduced a bug into this code, but I want you to experience it as it's very common, and knowing how and why to fix it will save you loads of time. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this, and let's compile it, and we'll get an error here. Okay, so it says, error, cannot find symbol, and it's pointing here to noun. That's interesting because we very clearly defined noun here, right here, inside of this block, inside of this do block here. The problem arises because of something called scope. Every time we open up a block of code like we do right here, it opens up a new variable scope. And code run outside of this scope. So see, here's the closing here. And here's the noun that we're using. And see, it's outside of that scope. So everything that runs outside of that scope can't see the variables declared inside. Now, the reason for this and why you might want to use this is a more advanced topic, and we'll get into that later in a further course. But for now, I'd like to assist you in solving the current problem of the outer scope not knowing about the variable. And it's actually pretty easy. What we want to do is we just want to declare the variable outside. So we'll say string noun. And then we want to remove the declaration here because we want it to be talking about the same variable, right? So we'll declare it here and then we'll use it here. Okay, so let's try that out. I'm going to save and let's compile and run. Great. Okay, so let's see. Dork. That language is not allowed to try again. Great. Jerk. Nope. Awesome. Okay, so now back to that bad practice we introduced of repeating ourselves. So what tool do we use when we want to store a value and reuse it? That's right, a variable. We can evaluate and store the results of the condition that's in the if statement and store that in a variable. As we said earlier, that's called a Boolean value. A Boolean is a primitive data type, and it stores true or false, and it uses the lowercase convention. Let's declare our variable. So it's Boolean is invalid word. And I'm going to go ahead and use the same trick that we did before with the parentheses. I'm just going to copy that from here. Paste him here. See if we can make that look a little bit cleaner. I think that reads pretty good. And so now we can use that Boolean. So we can say if is invalid word. We can use that Boolean here to remove that code that we duplicated. Fix that. Now I also noticed something else. Notice we're defining inside of the scope here, we're defining a Boolean, but when we're using it outside of the code block, what do? We're going to go ahead and do like we just learned. Remove this Boolean, put it up here. Great. Let's go ahead and save, compile. Let's make sure that things are still working. Great. It is. Excellent. I think we have a fully censorship-ready prototype.
Awesome job adding loops to your skill set. Now we know how to continuously run our code until a specific condition is met. I'm certain that you'll end up using this pattern quite a bit. We also learned that we can use a do-while loop to make sure that the code runs at least once, first before looping. There are other types of loops that we'll investigate in future projects, but the basic idea is the same for all of them. We stored the results of a condition in a Boolean variable so that we could reuse it and not repeat ourselves in code, and thus keeping things dry. We came up with a user-friendly way to censor input without causing the users to restart or lose data. I'm quite happy with where we ended up after soliciting feedback from our beta testers. I'd like to congratulate you here. We have a working prototype. I'd like to encourage you to show it off to your family and your friends. You should practice by making the story longer, add different parts of speech and experiment with other ways of censoring. Share your findings with the community. I've added a couple of suggestions of directions that I'd like you to explore in the teacher's notes. There are better ways to solve some of the problems that you're likely to run into. We just haven't gone over them yet. But the point is this: you created a working application and you immersed yourself in the Java language, and you did an awesome job at it. I hope you had a fun time doing it. I look forward to walking through our next problem and introducing you to more and more tools and concepts. Thanks again for hanging out, and I'll see you next time. After the exercise, of course. You didn't think I was going to let you go without a challenge, did you?